Hello and welcome to another A Tippling Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. A lot went on yesterday and I gave you that update, the second update in the day, to indicate that Lyman had fallen or been liberated by the Ukrainians in what was quite a decisive victory for them. So let's just return to our overall map of Ukraine. We have Crimea down the south, we have all the front lines going up to the Lyman area here, and then there's a little bit of thought to be put into what's going to happen up this sort of Oskil River front line to the east of Kharkiv. I will pronounce that more correctly today. Please correct me if I pronounce things incorrectly, and I'll try and read the comments enough to be able to correct myself. So Kharkiv. So anyway, we are going to be concentrating on this Oskil River front, which is from really the key areas Kupiansk down to Oskil at the bottom here, and then moving across to Lyman that was liberated yesterday. Let's have a look a little bit more closely at that front. Okay, so we have the Oskil River here. Yesterday, that pocket of resistance was kicked out of Lyman, and we have seen a retreating Russian force. This was the latest war map and map that shows that the Russians still hold this area. I don't think that's the case anymore. So this, just to let you know, these are my very poor renditions of the front lines. Very simple map, but this is what it was about 3 days ago. We had Lyman, Drobyshevi, Chandri, Holove holding out with a neck that was slightly wider here, going from Kolodyazi down to Torska. This is when, well, before this really, the Russians should have pulled out. So what happened over time is we had the neck closing in and certain villages being liberated until yesterday, Lyman, in the morning, Lyman was holding out with Zereshina and Torska, but it turns out that the Russians had been exfiltrating troops from there across this road, down this road, but there was it was well within artillery range here, and also special forces operating from the other side. So what happened is this turned into a bit of a killing fields here. Now, some pro-Ukrainians are saying that, this was an absolute massacre, and you had basically 5,000 troops or so getting out of Lyman and just being taken to pieces. More moderate thinkers are saying actually quite a lot of Russians escaped, and really, although there was a lot of destruction along this road and in these areas as a whole, and there have been POWs captured, and there is a fair amount of equipment lost, actually there were a number of escapees that got to Kreminna. So Kreminna's here, and today it's looking more like this. So again, my quality mapping cartography skills, apologies, but hopefully that's fairly clear. You can see the incremental gains that Ukrainian made, closing that bag until there was no option left for the Russians but to get out or die, and in some cases get out and die. So they did escape, and a lot of them have got to Kreminna by all accounts, but there were some severe losses, and this is going to be a monumental catastrophe in terms of PR for the Russian leadership. However, in a sense, how much is it a PR problem if your own people don't hear about it? So this is as much about propaganda management as well. So the question is now, what now for the Ukrainians? So a lot of people are saying, actually, now Kremlin is going to fall, then it'll be Rubizhne, then it'll be Severodonetsk, and then Lysychansk. But if you remember how hard it was for the Russians to take over, say, Severodonetsk from the Ukrainians, and Lyman took a good week or so, right? But these are basically conurbations. So what happened, what was key about Lyman is that Lyman was not attacked frontally particularly. So they didn't win or liberate Lyman by a frontal attack and then winning an urban warfare. What they succeeded in doing was completely encircling Lyman until there was no option left for the Russians but to escape, right? They couldn't get supplies in, so it would be a slow death in there, so they had to get out. What you normally operate, if you're attacking an urban area, you operate to a 7 to 1 troop ratio ideally 7-1 or more. Okay, so you can have 7 times more attackers than defenders, because the defenders will be in positions that can damage the attackers more than defenders get damaged. In other words, generally in these situations, you operate to a Pyrrhic victory, so that you overcome the enemy by simply outnumbering them, because it's so difficult to fight in urban scenarios. The issue here is, if we're going to look at the map, so this is Yoskil, this is the Sovietsky Donetsk River, joining Yoskil there, and you have this conurbation of Kremina, Rubizhne, Severodonetsk, and Lysychansk. Okay, if you are going to, so the Ukrainians were able to fully encircle Lyman, right? They were fully able to encircle Lyman and win that territory by encircling them. But they are going to find it a lot more difficult to encircle Kremina, because Rubizhne is right next door. And even more difficult to encircle Rubizhne because Severodonetsk is right next door, and Lysychansk as well. In other words, unless you did an all-out encirclement of all of these settlements, then you're not going to defeat these as easily as you are Lyman. Because any kind of frontal assault, there are shed loads more troops here, and there are shed loads more capability of the Russians to defend these towns. So there are people who are now saying, yeah, they're just going to carry on going around here, and this will completely disrupt the logistical access to the rest of Luhansk and northern Donetsk. Well, yes, it would if they could succeed in doing that, but I don't think they realistically could, given mobilization. So then what are your options? Well, I would say Svatove has got to be an option here. So I would take that line up to Svatove from Kremina, and I would also be heading to Starobilsk, which would then cut off the railway line down to here and then across to this area. So you can damage your logistics hugely to this area by taking Starobilsk, because it then means the Russians have to go all the way around here to get stuff from up north in Belgorod, all the way around here to come in through the back entrance of Luhansk and possibly come this way, yeah, or this way, to get supplies to the Luhansk and Donetsk front line. Now, the problem with attacking here and getting Svatove and Starobilsk is you have this kind of salient, and this is really easy to attack from the north. So a bunch of mobilized troops and some fresh units coming in from the north. This is really easy territory, and this is part of the reason why Ukrainians gave up this territory really quickly and easily. Because actually there's not a lot here, and it's not that easy to defend. So if you had a front line that went from Kupiansk to Starobilsk, okay, I would say that would be fairly sensible, because you're going to really damage their logistics. But you are going to be then, victim to being flanked from both sides, attacked from both sides. So whatever the Ukrainians do, there needs to be some serious thoughts about this, because if they're going to come around here and take these towns and cities, then that will be hugely intensive and will be costly in terms of resources and men. Although these are really important industrial hubs and logistical hubs. So that will be a huge, jewel in the crown of basically Luhansk. That is Luhansk, really. Okay, you got the city of Luhansk, but this would be hugely important. But I just think that's too difficult, given mobilized troops are starting to arrive, and who knows to what extent the mobilized troops will arrive and in what state they'll be in. I just think Starobilsk is got to be on the cards, but holding it might be difficult. But you could certainly get there, take it out, and take out the logistics in a meaningful way, such that it forces the Russians to sustainably have to use these access points for logistics. Anyway, that's my thoughts. So I don't know. At the moment, they're up to Kremina, and they will surely take up to Svatove without too much difficulty. I think, as far as I can work out, the Russian forces have pulled out from this area. So if we go back to the other war map, the Russians have pulled out from here, or are pulling out from here, and I would imagine are pulling out from all along here, because I don't think there's any point in them putting in effort to hold these places up to Kupiansk. It's just unsustainable for them. So I'd imagine they're pulling back to this road here, and then we'll see what the Ukrainians do. Okay, let's give a little bit of analysis. This is from a really interesting uh, article by Lawrence Friedman on a Substack. I'm just going to read you the last two paragraphs. There are believed to be some 2,500 troops in Lyman, along with a similar number already pushed out by Ukrainian forces from surrounding villages. The Russian Ministry of Defense announced that troops had been withdrawn to more, quote, defensible positions. Many appear to have been killed and captured in the process, as we've seen, largely because of heavy Ukrainian artillery fire. The Russians have lost yet more equipment. There are reports from Ukrainian sources that some days ago Russian troops asked for permission to evacuate, but this was denied. So I talked about this, the idea that it was Putin that kept those troops in Lyman. Eventually to their own, demise or capture or dodgy escape. The Russian already there are recriminations with various Russian factions blaming each other and pointing to a series of complacent command decisions, which I can show you here. So Russian commentators are blaming a variety of issues or commanders for the fall of Liman, but the primary problem is they simply don't have the forces required to hold the current front lines. And Putin is telling his military leaders they can't retreat. You can't retreat, but we don't have the forces. You can't retreat, but we don't have the forces. Mobilization, we'll get you some forces. Okay, we don't have the forces now. Oh dear, we've lost Liman. Okay, and they're blaming each other and blaming commands from on top. So that's very interesting. The Russian position in the area is now even worse, with shortages of men and even more stretched supply lines adding to their woes. The more Ukrainian forces can move forward, the more Russian assets are in artillery range. So it's not just about HIMARS, remember, this is about general artillery. So if they can move up to Kremina, then of course all these areas are starting to be within artillery. So your M777s and other long range artillery, maybe the Caesars and the Panzer howitzers, and other such, like the Polish Krabs, have long ranges as pieces of artillery. So they can start hitting these places. Flip side is obviously the Ukrainians don't want to destroy their own towns and cities, and this is the difference between Russia going into these places where they're happy to flatten them. And the Ukrainians going to these places, they don't want to flatten them. They don't want to kill civilians because these are their own places. Okay, so there you go. The more Ukrainian forces can move forward, the more the Russian assets are in artillery range. Ukrainian units are reported to be pressing Kremina and may soon threaten the Russian positions in Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, taken in June after a long and costly for both sides struggle. There are also reports of a new push by Ukrainian forces in Kherson, and I will talk about that in a second. All this mocks Putin's announcement, demonstrating that he can't hold or what he has just annexed. The question now is how long the Russian people, and most importantly members of the power elite, put up with this recklessness. Polling suggests that support for the war has fallen sharply. The latest shows that from 48% of Russians wanting the war to continue in August, now only 29% are determined about pressing on. Another 15% are lukewarm and 48% want peace. Putin offers no way to fight or negotiate a way to victory. More men may so far have fled the country than have joined the army. The audience at St. George's Hall looked more perplexed than inspired, watching a man who has lost his swagger, caught up in a deluded world of his own construction, but out of which he has inflicted a real world catastrophe. And that's super, super important. So lots of recriminations going on inside. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are trolling. So here is, and I've shown you Defense of Ukraine, the government Twitter site that is just a supreme troll. Source of trolling. We thank the, quote, Ministry of Defense of Russia because obviously they haven't defended very well, for successful cooperation in organizing the Izium 2.0. So not only do they just take Izium quite easily, but they've taken Liman exercise. Almost all Russian troops deployed to Liman were successfully redeployed either into body bags or into captivity. We have one question for you. Would you like a repeat? So they are doing some super level trolling. Obviously, we have to remember that in these kind of maps, and I say this in most videos now, that this involves a huge amounts of death, right? And although these are Russian troops, and you might call them orcs, and you might say these are horrible people, when they are being horrible, it's because they've been brainwashed by the Russian propaganda and authorities, and they may hate they may not want to be there, not hate the Ukrainians, in which case it's doubly sad. But if they hate the Ukrainians, it's not because of anything other than that's what they've been fed as this propagandistic diet. And it's just terribly sad. It's terribly sad that in order for Putin to be shown to be incorrect, thousands of people have to die, and that's horrible. But there you go. So that a bit of trolling from the Ukrainian authorities. So to continue going down the front lines, not a lot is happening in terms of territory gain from either side, although a lot is happening. So it's intense fighting. This is just bizarre. Why are Russia continuing to beat their head against this Bakhmut brick wall? So they are continuing to attack around here, New York, all these places along here, and yet they are losing it up around these key areas of Lyman and possibly Kremenna, Rubizhne, Severodonetsk, and Lysychansk under threat. And you're thinking, what are you doing here? Why is this happening? Why are you putting all that effort into one area at the expense of another? And it's just absolutely ridiculous. So let's talk about that a little bit. Sorry, here it is. So this is Philip O'Brien saying Ukraine proceeding to relentlessly grind down Russian logistics hubs, rail hub to rail hub, Kupiansk, Izium, Lyman, and next Svatove. And they've already been hitting hubs around Svatove with HIMARS, while Russia bashes its head against Bakhmut for no reason that makes sense. One side is intelligent, the other side isn't. And we have a further analysis from Philip O'Brien, who agrees with Ilya Ponomarenko, who's a fantastic Kiev independent journalist. So agree with this, that the Battle of Lyman is the Ukrainian victory. We'll tweet about this in more detail during the week, blah, blah, blah. But the Battle of Lyman is in many ways more revealing than the Kharkiv campaign. The Kharkiv campaign. The Kharkiv campaign advance happened because the Ukrainians hit the Russians where they were mostly undefended. That allowed a fast, deep advance into empty space as the Russians had nothing to slow the advance. What just happened around Lyman is far more impressive in that way. Far more impressive in a way. The Russians had made this a major priority area for months, seemed to have lots of troops in the area. So the Ukrainians had to methodically take on a much larger enemy that seems tolerably well armed. Still, the Ukrainians fixed them in Lyman, hit their logistics in the north, and then surrounded the city from both sides. This requires planning and executing of the highest order. Also, more revealing of what is coming, the Ukrainians might never find an area as weakly defended as Kharkiv again. What they've learned and done at Lyman points away to their overall strategic victory. And this goes back to, well, actually, what is their next step? Is it going to be to, as I discussed earlier, go up here, go to Starobelsk, take around here? Are they going to use their knowledge of encircling and how they've succeeded in and around Lyman to take that further on? Is that applicable to these other towns? Okay, so why are the Russians attacking at Bakhmut? Who knows? And not, working really hard, sending up their Wagner troops who seem to be doing a fairly okay job here to be able to do better further up north. Okay, so they're hitting their head against the wall. Not a lot happening along these fronts other than the regular sort of exchange of artillery and whatnot. Kherson. This front has been unmoving for quite some time now, but there appears to be a renewed effort by the Ukrainians in the Davidi Brid salient and in the northern salient. So watch this space over the next coming days. I don't know why particularly. Maybe they're worried about mobilization coming. I showed you that trainload in Crimea, trainload of tanks, obviously old material, but still, possibly worrying for the Kherson front line here and the Ukrainian troops here, so they want to maybe take as much territory as they can as quickly as possible now, thinking about what's coming for them at a future point. But this is a meat grinder, so it's not easy to do that. They'll have to use artillery very effectively in order to punch holes through these positions. Okay, so that's all the front lines and a little bit of a discussion. I want to just talk to you about a couple of other points. Now, here is an example of an abandoned Russian position in Lyman. So here we have the fourth picture: red bags, stolen women's tights, and an immersion blender. These troops were really out there, slowly getting encircled, yet had mental energy to lug back a stolen immersion blender for the family back home. And this is, not only do you see the terrible, mangled remains of equipment and materiel and all these destroyed bits and pieces. But then you've got what the Russians were actually doing, which is looting, and looting in the most kind of bizarre way, just looting stuff to take back to their family that you think, oh my goodness, is this what it's come down to? You just thieves. You just generally, you're at war, but you are basically thieves. So that's quite indicative. Up in Kupiansk, they're now finding. So yesterday we heard the terrible news of the convoy that was hit the day before in Zaporizhia, where or at least 30 people have died, including children. Where the Russians, at the exact same time that they were announcing the annexation of the 4 regions and having a party in Moscow, they were bombing a convoy of civilians. Well, another atrocity has been uncovered in Kupiansk, where a convoy of civilian cars, was attacked a week ago. 7 families' cars were fired on by the retreating Russians. 20 people were killed, including 10 children. It's just absolutely despicable. Here's another, so moving on to a completely different point, which is that at the same time that Russia is calling for mass mobilization and as many as maybe over 1 million troops being called to the front line mobilized, the initial calls were for 300,000, but evidence is that they're just kind of recruiting everyone and anyone. And the numbers, if you extrapolate, seem to point to over 1 million people. At least that would be the intentions. Zelensky, on the other hand, has cancelled their annual conscription. And he's postponed demobilization, which is to say that actually the troops we've got now, we don't want any more troops. We've got enough. So the president has cancelled the draft to regular military service in Ukraine this autumn and postponed the demobilization schedule for October to December, according to a decree published on September 30th. So we're fine with what we got, which is great. You'll be turned away at any other conscription site. We just need to work with what we got. Quite an interesting juxtaposition to what is going on in Russia. Okay, this is kind of bizarre. And I need to look into that. This is from yesterday, so I haven't had time to check this out today. A lot of theories sent to me about this. The most popular and likely is that they are marine mines, but why bury them in already dug trenches? Some correspondents adamant they'll be covered up with contaminated waste and then blown up when Ukrainian army approaches. So this is what happened. Another strange video has been published, which I cannot verify. A Ukraine patriot says this is happening in occupied Zaporizhia region. Russia seems to be burying things and no one knows what, but some allege it must be chemical weapons. So I'll just show you this. Trench there. Turn the sound off. There's a trench there, and they appear to be burying something, whether that's chemical weapons, whether that's mines. They're burying that in a trench. You know, what is going on? What is going on? This is a bizarre thing to be doing. Okay, so then the next one to show you is this, which it looks like the Ukrainians knew about this, or obviously they've been recording it. Earlier I posted a mysterious drone video showing that what may have been Russia burying marine mines in a field. Is this Ukraine hitting them or another similar trench of buried explosives, potentially before any harmful substance is placed on top? So this is you know what you do. This is the usefulness of drones, right? How important they are. Oh look, they're burying a bunch of stuff, let's blow it up before they can use it against us. That's an absolutely phenomenal explosion. Unreal. So there you go. This is all pretty unverified, so take this with a pinch of salt. I will try and look into it today. I just haven't. I've only kind of just got up. So that's definitely worthy of some further investigation. So this is yesterday. I reported in my video almost live that there was an explosion at the Sevastopol airport. I think the Ukrainians pronounce it slightly differently, but in the West we pronounce it Sevastopol. And I said there's been an explosion. It looks like it could be a rocket attack or something like that. It turns out it was a plane catching fire and driving off the end of the cliff and firing off its rockets, or the rockets exploding, cooking off. So here it is by drone footage. So you can see the plane just there, and then something happens. And then it goes off the, sorry, I've paused it. It goes off the cliff and then blows up and cooks off. And its rockets fire off, and then a massive black cloud and I showed you pictures of people on the beach around the corner witnessing that massive black cloud. So there it is. It was genuinely a plane. A couple of Russian helicopters were hit yesterday, Ka-52s or Ka-52s, depending on how you pronounce them, being hit by manpads. So here we have a very low-flying helicopter, and you can see the manpad rockets. There it is there, being fired off. An explosion there. That could well be from the helicopter, and then the helicopter goes down over here. And there's another helicopter there, multiple helicopters flying around. All sorts of stuff going on. Anyway, there's the remains of one of the Ka-52s or Ka-52s. And here is another one. I don't think that's the same one, but it who knows? It could well be. But there is a report that two were shot down yesterday. So that's really good news. This is something that's been happening a lot to the Russians because they've been using their artillery so fiercely that they haven't been able to maintain it correctly, replace the barrels and whatnot. So the boring on the barrels, what happens is when you fire artillery shells at the barrel, it deteriorates the barrel and you have to look after the barrel, maintain it, and often you have to replace them. And if you don't do that, then eventually they just kind of burst off, they explode. Like this one has done. So this is a crab, I think. So this is a Polish crab, which is 150mm self-propelled howitzer, and the barrel is just basically blown off because it's been used and used and used. So that will have to be replaced. I mean, luckily that's quite doable. It's all in perfectly good nick, so they'll just send that back to Poland and they'll get that barrel replaced. But that's now taken out. That will be taken out for weeks. So this is the importance of maintaining your equipment so that doesn't happen. Going back to Russian conscription, the Russian rapper Ivan Petunin has committed suicide. He recorded a message to his fans about mobilization. He said he refuses to murder another man. He said Putin has taken all Russian men captive, leaving them with three choices: becoming a murderer, going to prison, or suicide. And he took the suicide option, which is obviously desperately sad. But this shows, I mean, the importance of something like this is the Russian people who see that. Okay, as sad as that is, and that's terrible. Oh, it's just, this is what a despotic leader is forcing his people to do, or at least some of them. Some of them feel there is no choice. I don't want to be a murderer. I don't want to go to prison for refusing to be conscripted. Suicide's the only way. But in telling other people about this, then he is going to be, creating his own bit of propaganda that will be really problematic for the Russian authorities. Final thing I'm going to show, sorry, I have been going on loads and really long, but this is a video I was going to show you the other day. This is the Wall Street Journal video. A journalist in the Wall Street Journal was given access to HIMARS, and here he is talking about them. And I think this is just an interesting video to watch.
We're here in southern Ukraine, where the military has given us very rare access to HIMARS, which are very mobile artillery devices. The Americans have given the Ukrainians 16 of these since June.
HIMARS якщо не одна з найефективніших, то саме ефективніша установка на полі бою.
These HIMARS have been critical to some of the recent counteroffensives the Ukrainians have launched against Russian positions. The systems carry usually 6 missiles, which at the moment have a range of 80 kilometers, allowing the Ukrainians to strike deeper into Russian-held territory than any other system they've had. The operators we spoke to this week told us that these HIMARS now make up 70% of the firepower deployed near the front lines.
І коли ми доїжджаємо до той точці, з якої ми можемо вже вести вогонь, воно нам показує, що звідси ми можемо вже стріляти. І по команді, коли нам дає командир команду, ми піднімаємо і fire.
The HIMARS are hitting everything at this point. Ammo depots, headquarters, bridges, groupings of personnel, tanks, vehicles. These weapon systems have changed the course of the war for Ukraine. They've allowed the military to start pushing back, taking back lands as they have in the past few weeks. both in the southern front and as well as in Donbass and up in the north.
Ми раніше воювали на старих українських зразках озброєння після Радянського Союзу. І зараз маємо можливість використовувати цю чудову техніку для нашої перемоги у війні проти Росії.
Russia's defense minister has told Russian troops to make Ukraine's long-range weaponry a priority target, in a sign that Ukraine's additional firepower is taking a toll on Moscow's forces. Russia still occupies large swaths of southern and eastern Ukraine, and the US had promised to send 18 more HIMARS as part of a multi-year plan. But to fight off Russia's invasion, Kyiv is also asking for other advanced weapons, like tanks and fighter jets, from its Western allies.
So that's fascinating, as representing 70% of the frontline, attack capability at the moment. Huge difference that's made. So this is a comment by YouTube on my last video that is taking the stats from Oryx. So I've talked to you about Oryx and how that's one of the best sources of quality information about what has both been given to Ukraine, but also what has been lost by both sides. And compiling those resources, he says that of the HIMARS that have been given, 16 and 9, there are slightly different versions of them. There are HIMARS, but there are also these M270s, which from the UK, some been given by the UK and Germany as well. So, been given a bunch of these, a bunch of other artillery, M109, 112 in total. Caesars, which are these self-propelled, really long-range ones, they're really good. 18 from France, 78 Crabs from Poland, the one you just seen with its barrel missing. The Panzer Howitzers, which are supposedly the best in the world, 20 from Germany, Italy and Netherlands. And then you've got these other ones. But how many of these have been lost? Well, 0 HIMARS, so 0%. M109s, 2 out of 112. Caesars, 0. Panzer Howitzers, 0. Crabs, 1. Zuzana, 0. Bodana, 0. M777s, 9 out of 118, so 7% of them. What this shows you is that the capability that has been drafted into the Ukrainian assistance has been not only really effectively used, but also really effectively protected. And they still have this capability. So when we give them more stuff, it's adding to what's already there, because they have lost barely any of it compared to what the Russians are losing, which is quite staggering. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting bit of statistic after showing you the HIMARS video. Sorry this has taken a long time. I hope this has been interesting. Please put your comments down below. I do try and react to a lot of them. Thank you for all your kind words. Really appreciate this. I'm just a random philosopher on the internet who is interested in this and trying to aggregate news for you in a way that is interesting, with maps that are hopefully quite easy to understand, because it's just a basic map with me drawing on it. I'm sorry, that's just what time permits in my life. But yeah, thank you for all your support. Thanks for your thanks that you give, and you buy me a coffee and all those things that are available in the description down there. But please like, subscribe, share, and continue watching. Really do appreciate, and welcome on board, everyone. As I've said before, you can go down to the cog in the YouTube video and put me on 2 times speed, 1.5, 1.75 times speed. I'll speak even quicker for you, and you can get more done with your day. So thank you. Just to let you know, I do have multiple sclerosis, so if I get the words wrong or mix up my words, I'm really sorry about that. It's just my brain isn't as good as it used to be. That's life, and sometimes it sucks. Anyway, thanks so much for all your support and for popping by. See you tomorrow. Bye.